how can I find a way of fulfilling God's mission in that place? Because actually part of what that does is that begins to sanctify that space. And that's part of what you get to do as a representation of Christ. And so you then have to try and understand, how do I best represent Jesus in this space of football that I get to be in? Whether that's a fan or, a volunteer chaplain, or a ball boy, or you're a player, or a physio, or a chairman.
Hello and welcome to Onside, where faith meets football. My name is Eamonn, and as per usual, I'm joined by my co-host and friend Wana. And in this series so far, we've been interviewing people who work within the world of football, who are believers, to try to understand how faith has played a part in their work. And this is the final episode in our series. And today, we're going to touch on some aspects that kept coming up in the conversations we were having. And so we're going to kick off by starting how we always do in every episode and asking the two same questions. And we haven't really answered these questions in any of the episodes so far. And so, Wana, tell us, what football team do you support and what's your best football in memory?
Well, I am both proud and devastated to reveal that my team of choice is Chelsea Football Club. It's a tough time right now to be a Chelsea fan. We've had some good times, but I feel like this is the opposite of what Ineos is doing. That's kind of how I'm experiencing this right now. Is we've had an owner come in and they're just coming with their own random ideas, no real strategy, throwing everything to the wind, trying to be City in a year. And then I'm looking over at the Red Devils over there, and they've come in with a plan. They're hiring the best of the best. It's tough time to be a Chelsea fan, but anyway, I'm sticking through with it. But favourite memory, easy this one, easy for me at least, because I watched it live and I went mad, was us winning Champions League. I think what made it so special is it came at the end of our, the core that we had. That was effectively their final season. Drogba's final season, pretty much Terry's final season. Lampard stayed a little bit after, I believe. But it was pretty much like all the icons that I grew up with, this was their last chance. And we'd had a bunch of different chances in Champions League. We came closer. A few times we got snaked. If there was VAR back in the day, you know what I mean? We might have another Champions League to go with it. But losing and just having that little bit of hope of maybe Drogba, please. And then the corner goes in, goes to extra time, and then Drogba is the one who scores the winning penalty. Nothing come close to it. The other Champions League we won is a close second. I lived at the time on a street of only City fans. Yeah. And everyone who was a City fan had been bragging all week. And I was the only one screaming that day because of a goal. Everyone else was quiet. So that's a close second, but has to be that Champions League for me. Eamonn, what about you, though? Who's your favourite team and your favourite sport in memory?
Well, I support the greatest football team on the planet, Manchester United.
Oh, controversial.
As a Manchester born and bred, it's in me genes, it's in me blood. My blood runs red, literally. And yeah, best sporting memory. To be honest, I kind of split this up into two. The best memory I have is Champions League 2008 when we won against Chelsea.
You know what? Yeah, you didn't have to go there. Let's be honest.
No,
you didn't have to go there at all.
It was my best. I don't remember 99. I was only 3 years old in 1999.
Yeah, barely.
So I'm not one of those fans who pretends he remembers it. The Champions League 2008 was my first Champions League win experience as a fan. I remember watching it on this 19-inch TV, box TV.
Wow.
It had a video VHS player in it. That's how kind of small and old this TV was. I remember watching it, and I remember my mum kicking off because it was late and it was going to penalties and everything like this. That's what I'd say is my best memory watching it, but live in the stadium. I go to United fairly regularly, right? And these two this season, even though it's been a terrible season, have been the highlights for me in my whole Man United watching life, right? Against Brentford in the league, we're 1-0 down. And the 91st minute or whatever it was, Scott McTominay, McSauce, equalises it to make it 1-1. And then he scores again at like the 94th minute to make it 2-1. So we get 2 goals after the 90th minute. And
Unbelievable.
being there in Old Trafford, everyone's fuming for the whole 90 minutes, kicking off with terrible Ten Hag out, all this type of stuff. To then just having 2 goals after 90 minutes, there's nothing like it. Listen to a stadium just erupt like that. That was madness. And the second one was Boxing Day against Aston Villa. Aston Villa are obviously really good this season, and they were 2-0 up at half time. I was stood there, and everyone around me is just like, what's the point? Should I go home? The people next to me actually went home at half time. But they left at half time because they were like, this is dreadful, 2-0, not worth staying. And then we ended up winning 3-2 on Boxing Day against a really good Aston Villa side who were like second in the league at that time. And then that's when Rasmus Højlund got his first goal. Honestly, there was just so much to it.
Hey, he got his miracle. He got his miracle.
If you know, you know. Live memories, like just anything where we kind of got a great comeback on 90th minutes. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So there you go, guys. Well, we'll kick off into one of the topics that we want to talk about. And one key theme that came out of all of our conversations was around church on Sunday versus playing sports on a Sunday. Now, amateur football has a nickname of Sunday League, as most games are played on Sunday mornings, which is often when church meetings are. So a lot of Christians who love football and want to play football, or even parents who have children who play football, are faced with this conflict of going to church on a Sunday or playing football instead. And so we wanted to share our opinion and our perspective. But before we do, here's some of the things that our guest said on the matter. So Fran Clarkson, who is the women's lead physiotherapist at the FA, highlighted the fact that she came to the point in her life where she felt this tension between going to church and pursuing sport on Sundays. And she said, and I quote, "God is interested in every moment of my life, not just Sunday morning or Sunday evening, but everything and anything that I do, say, think is in response to what he's done for me. So Sunday sport was something that I was going to pursue, keeping it in its rightful place, recognizing that I was playing it for him." George Moncure, who is a midfielder playing for Leyton Orient at the moment, said Sundays is one of his days off, and so he wants to spend that time with his family, so finds it difficult to get plugged into church in a traditional way. And so he understands the importance of meeting together with other believers. So he started an online group for Christians, and they meet together every week on Zoom for a Bible study and prayer time. And they also, at the club, they have Bible studies with other players and other staff. And finally, Peter Lupson, a historian who has done huge amounts of research into the history of football, has found many clubs can trace their origins back to Christian groups or churches, said that he knew boys that attended church instead of playing football on Sundays. And these boys were teased at school for not playing for their local team and going to church instead. And so he started a church league that played on a Saturday morning so those boys could still play football and also go to church. And that ultimately helped inspire him to start his research into football clubs to understand their origins, so he can also provide these boys with some ammunition to show that they came from a rich tradition of Christians who are involved in football. There is a mix of opinions there, and many people may be in the same boat where they're feeling this conflict. So what do you think, Wana? Should Christians miss church on Sunday to play football?
On the whole, the main thread for me that came out is this sense of how do I honor God? And am I putting something in the place of where God's supposed to be in my life? And so that kind of took me to Hebrews 10, where the main bulk of the chapter is talking about the sacrifice of Christ and kind of what Christ paid for us to come into a relationship with him and to be able to enjoy that in the way that we do in the new covenant. And then it talks on don't neglect meeting together, and talks about holding on to our faith, being dedicated in our relationship with God and to one another, encourage each other in the faith. And so I think part of the tension for me of Christian life, not just in football, but in general, is sometimes there's an over-reliance on the Sunday morning meeting. But generally, when we think of church, we think of it's Sunday morning, and it might be a midweek thing. And also we think of it's a build, I'm going to church. Do you know what I mean? But I think Fran did a really good job of bringing this out, that actually what it means to be a follower of Christ is I've given him my life. It's through my whole life that I'm worshiping God. And then I also have to make sure that the things I'm doing don't dishonoring God. So that's part of why that Hebrews 10 really resonated with me, because the writer of Hebrews is encouraging us to have Christ's sacrifice in mind as we live life. So we should be, and that's part of how we can almost like protect the genuineness of our faith in a sense, is that if I'm a young 13-year-old kid and I've professed my faith in Jesus, I'm a Christian, and I'm giving myself to football, I believe God's called me to football, I can't make Sundays, how can I still honor what Jesus has done for me? And also the fact that I'm placed in a body, I'm not in isolation. And I think George brought this out as well in that sense of he had to find a way of still relating with the body of Christ. Yeah. And he said himself, he's still trying to figure out how to get to a more regular in-person thing, because he just felt that he still needed to try and figure that sense out. But he still said, whatever I can do is I'll find a way. And I think that idea of not neglecting, it can be a habit to just say, oh, I just can't, so I just won't. But actually, that's something to be protected, that we meet together, because that's where encouragement comes from, support comes from, and we also get to interact with Jesus the way that he sacrificed for us to be able to do. So those are kind of my main thoughts around that kind of tension. I think a lot of it comes down to, if it's something that you're pursuing and you're doing it to honor him, it's a valid question to think, actually, there is a worth to me doing this on Sunday, but it means I have to be more proactive. I'm making sure that I'm not neglecting as far as I'm concerned. Do you know what I mean? From my part. So how about you? How did you kind of resonate with some of the things that were said?
In Acts chapter 2, you see that it says in verse 46, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And it's that every day they continue to meet together.
Yeah.
And I think what we've done is, in the modern church world, we've made the bar really low of what it is to kind of be to be in a church, which is basically come on a Sunday and please can you come on midweek, and we'll beg, borrow and steal for you to come to a midweek meeting. But the Sunday, come to the Sunday more than anything else. And so people, as you say, engage with really Christianity only on a Sunday. Where in fact, the early church met regularly. They were regularly part of a community. And I think, missing church on a Sunday is not necessarily a bad thing, but as long as there's something else there, there's some still connection and union, there's still some feeding going on in other aspects, whether that is a midweek or whether that is just meeting together in terms of what George was doing and having a Bible study and praying together and whatever it is. And so I think it's something that is not a black and white, yes or no, go to church on a Sunday. There's some kind of nuance in that. So we'll swiftly move on to the next theme that came up a number of times, and that was around the importance of football. Now, many Christians see football and many other aspects of life as pretty pointless. I've interacted with Christians, and when my team has lost and I've been visibly frustrated or displayed any other kind of emotion, they've said, well, it doesn't matter because Jesus is king, God is on the throne, it has no eternal impact. And I mean, all of that is true, let's be honest. But they mean it in such a way to say that football is pointless and that we shouldn't be passionate about it. But I think we should be passionate about football, and football does matter. But before we share our opinion in more detail, here are some of the things that our guest said on the matter. So Peter Lupson again talked about how these churches and Christian groups who started football clubs did so as they saw football as a way of building good character in young men, and football was also a great way to reach the lost. Phil Mason, who is the COO and the chaplain of Bolton Wanderers, spoke about how Bolton connect with church groups in the city and invite people on the peripheries to come to a game, have fun, meet players, and it's an opportunity to share the gospel. Ian Lancaster spoke about how Christians in sport as an organisation help athletes from a professional to an amateur level see that they are just as much as a Christian inside the church as they are outside, and that football is not the means to an end in terms of seeing salvation, but we can enjoy football, we can be passionate about football, we can enjoy the gifts that we have. And ultimately, football is a great place for friendship evangelism. It's a great place to share life and ultimately share the good news of Jesus. I mean, let's be honest, it was no surprise that our guests were going to hammer home how important football was. So, Wana, what do you think? Is football important? Should Christians take football more seriously? Can we be passionate about it? What do you think?
I'm somewhere in the middle, maybe, is where I fall. I think one of the things that God doesn't do is devalue a human experience. Do you know what I mean? And he doesn't devalue the things that we would take as like living life. So one of the things that happened in Genesis, he gives Adam work to do and he gives Adam tasks to do. Whatever his itinerary looked like, there was stuff for him to do. And when Eve was created, there was stuff for them to do and stuff for them. Some of it was tending to gardens, some of it was enjoying food. Some, do you know what I mean? They lived a life. And throughout the whole story of God and his people, he never devalues living life. And actually, part of the provision of Jesus is that we can relate to God in a way where he understands what it is to live life. He knows what it's like to be a child, to be a teenager, to be an adult, to have a job, to be an apprentice, to have parents, to have brothers and sisters, to have friends, to go to a wedding. Do you know what I mean? Like, God actually understands all that stuff. I don't resonate with the idea of don't be passionate about anything that looks like it's not Jesus. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of idea of if you're not reading your Bible, then you shouldn't be doing anything. I don't agree with that because I don't think that's modeled in scripture. Do you know what I mean? I think there's an expectation of you to be engaged with the world around you, but from the perspective of God is the one who kind of determines the boundaries of my actions, do you know what I mean? Or how I interact with the world. So, you know, you've got that popular saying, you're in the world, you're not of the world.
Yeah.
And I know there's a bit of dispute about whether that phrase is correct, but that's the general idea, is that when we become Christians, the limits of our environment are different, are changed. We're now representatives of Christ. But Jesus very much said, I still want you to go into the world. I don't want you to live, you know, this kind of hermit life where you just wait in until the end. I'm not going to take you straight away when you become a Christian. My expectation is you continue to live a life that is long, that is fruitful. That's God's expectation for all of us. And so I think the best way is that Christians shouldn't feel guilty about enjoying life. That's why God created it. Life is supposed to be enjoyable, and sin has kind of distorted certain elements. You know what I mean? And so similarly to what we were talking about in the previous one, it's really a question of, am I honoring God? It's really a question of lordship. Do you know what I mean? So if football, and it's not just football, there's many, many different things that can take the place of God. But if football becomes our religion in that sense, you know what I mean? There are a lot of people who say, football's my religion, or I've got some mates who are musicians and be like, music's my religion. And if it gets to the point where I'm more dedicated to football, like football dictates everything about me, and there's no room for God to have space in my life because everything is governed by Saturday kickoff, Sunday kickoff, Monday kickoff, Wednesday kickoff, Thursday kickoff, sometimes Friday. Do you know what I mean? Like the whole week can just be, it's all football. I think that's where it's then like, okay, that maybe you're allowing football to take the place that God has in your life. But for me, if it hasn't done that, I see no problem in interacting with it in a passionate way because God provides that expectation of life. And I think actually, when you look at God's intention for humanity, it's always that you take what you have in God and take it to all the world, reproduce it everywhere. And so one of the places in the world is sport. And so that's why I was so encouraged hearing all these stories, because we don't know. Do you know what I mean? We don't really know, unless maybe you're in a community where your football club is really active in that way. I would never have guessed that a football club, professional football club, would be having messy church on a Sunday. Do you know what I mean? That's not something that I was in my sphere. But actually, that's not only them enjoying the kind of the football element, but you're actually on the mission of God. That's the mandate for humanity from God, is go and make disciples, be fruitful, but also to be able to cultivate good things. Do you know what I mean? And so it's not all about, oh, we have to see numbers. Do you know what I mean? I don't think, you know, the guys at Bolton were saying, if we've not had 20 Christians and 20 people saved last week, we failed. He very much was saying, actually, no, part of what we do is we just want to do good things in the community. And Jesus modeled that life of where he would go to places and just do good stuff, and then he'd leave. And maybe only 5% of the people he did good things for ever actually reciprocated anything towards him. A lot of the people Jesus healed They took the healing and they went. Do you know what I mean? You've got that story of the lepers where only one of them comes back. That is not an uncommon thing. But Jesus never said, I'm only going to do it if all of you convert. Do you know what I mean? It's not about the conversion. And so I think if we can widen our viewpoint of what's God's intention, what's Christ's mission for all of us, he's called all of us to go out and make disciples. And so how can I do that? And if there's something that really resonates with me, how can I find a way of fulfilling God's mission in that place? Because actually part of what that does is that begins to sanctify that space. And that's part of what you get to do as a representation of Christ. And so you then have to try and understand what it means to how do I best represent Jesus in this space of football that I get to be in, whether that's a fan or, a volunteer chaplain or a ball boy, or you're a player or physio or chairman. I think in every area of life, isn't it the same? Is how can I do that? Yeah, I would never say don't be passionate about anything.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Like when I go to the football, I always end up chatting to random people. Like I went to a game not long ago. My second team is Oldham Athletic, I should say that. Me and Wana, we go to a church in Oldham. I'm not from Oldham. I've only moved there as a teenager. When we moved there, Oldham Athletic kind of became my second team. And I was at a game not long ago and I was in the queue. I'm just talking to my mates. So this guy just turned around who's in front of us. I was like, "You're right, lads. What do you think the score's going to be?" Like just talking about the game and the team and the manager. That's like weird in any other setting. I mean, if I'm on the train and I just turn around to someone and go, "Hey, what do you think about this train journey?" But like with football, like there's something natural about it because I think it's a great equalizer and it's a great place to connect with people and share life with them and live out the mission of making disciples of the nations. We shouldn't discard it and we shouldn't just kind of throw it away and say, well, Jesus is on the throne, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't have any eternal impact. If Man United win or lose, most likely lose this season, that's not going to have an impact on what's going on in heaven. I'm sure when I die and I get to heaven or the Lord returns, I'm not really going to care if Man United win or lose. I'm going to be focused on much better things. But ultimately, in the here and the now, it does matter. And I think it's something that we should be allowed to be passionate about. So the last question, from what you've heard from all the guests so far, what's exciting you about what God is doing in the world of football?
Oh man, God's on the move. And also, I don't need to be privy to things for God to be moving. I can have a comfort of knowing that God is moving. And so that's one of the reasons why I don't think you can discount sport or music or passion things, because God is using that space to meet needs. And even the history of football goes into how critical God was in the formation of football as a sport and a thing in this, not just in this country, but globally. In the same way that football started through the church and through desire to reach community and help train people, God is still using it in that same way. So that really excites me. How about you?
It's really exciting to hear all the different stories of how God is working within the world of football. The perception is that it's completely ungodly, that it's completely separate to God. You can't, they can't go together. But hearing the stories of how God is moving and how God is working was really encouraging to me to know what God is doing in the world of football, the sport that we love. But it's been an absolute pleasure being with you for these past couple of episodes. And if you would like some more biblical-based podcasts and programs, you can do so by simply heading over to our website. That's gnba.net. That's gnba.net. This podcast is part of a wider ministry that aims to teach the Bible through media. And so you can find out more about what we're doing on our website, as well as our social media and things. Just search Good News Broadcasting. You'll be able to find us. But this is it from us, from Wana and myself. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again.